Project Sunflower Harmony, Chapter 13, A Very Busy Weekend, Part 1. Twilight. Twilight yawned hugely as she made her way through the streets of Canterlot, which were painted a cheerful gold by the freshly risen sun. Breakfast that Friday morning was at the Silver Crescent at Rarity's suggestion. According to her, the place had just opened up recently and had quickly become locally popular. Rarity had been right. Twilight saw the line before the cafe itself even came into view. The line of ponies went out the door and down the street before disappearing around the corner at the end of the block. Twilight let out a short groan at the sight and started wondering if she'd been able to convince Rarity to eat somewhere else. As she got closer, though, she noticed that there were two sets of doors. The set on the left was for to-go only, which was responsible for the long line. The second set of doors was for sit-in dining and had no wait at all. Her mood much improved, Twilight picking up the pace at the prompting of her grumbling stomach and let herself into the second set of doors. She immediately spotted Rarity sitting at a small table in the dining area, reading from a menu and sipping tea. Her friend's mane was up in a business-like bun on the back of her head, though, for Rarity, business-like still included several jeweled pins to keep it in place. "Hi, Rarity," Twilight said as she sat down, slinging her saddlebags over the empty chair between them. "Twilight!" Rarity beamed and put aside the menu. "How lovely to see you. You look, not exactly well rested, actually." She offered a sympathetic smile. "Yesterday didn't go smoothly, I take it?" Twilight uttered a short, bitter laugh. "You could say that. Their paperwork was such a mess I actually took a break to bring Spike back to help out. They only had half of the visas completed and properly signed off. I had to run over to the ministry office itself to rush everything through. And even then I had to drop Princess Celestia's name more than once to get any pony moving." She sighed, massaging her temples with her hoofs. "On top of that, I have the strangest feeling I've forgotten something important." Shrugging, she offered up a weak smile. "Oh, well, at least the most crucial stuff should more or less be ready by now. I'm heading back there after breakfast to make absolutely sure." Rarity smiled. "Another crisis averted by Twilight Sparkle's amazing organizational skills. This calls for a celebration." Twilight chuckled. "Well, yes, I am good at organizing. I just wish everything hadn't been so—" She waved a hoof vaguely, trying to get the right word to pop up in her tired and stressed-addled mind. "Last minute?" "Yeah, that works." Twilight looked around. The line at the to-go window was moving pretty quickly. Ponies would walk up and order their drinks, shuffle off to one side, and a few moments later one of the baristas would pass over an insulated paper cup full of coffee. "This place sure is busy," she noted. "They have excellent coffee," Rarity said. "It doesn't hurt that they're also very quick. Plus they have their logo emblazoned on every cup of coffee they sell. It's all about branding, dear. Ponies see those cups everywhere, and so they want the same thing." Twilight frowned at the logo printed on her menu. "You know, I have to think Princess Luna might be upset about that, since it looks an awful lot like a cutie mark." "Well, it's not as if a crescent moon is an uncommon symbol," Rarity replied. "Doesn't your father also have a crescent moon cutie mark?" "Well, yeah, but it looks totally different." Twilight rolled her eyes and grimaced. "Okay, you're right. Maybe I'm just a bit cranky after the day I had yesterday." "It's quite all right, darling." Twilight smothered a yawn behind her hoof. "Sorry, anyway, how did your day go?" "Quite well, actually. They desperately needed my help with the aesthetics of the planned designs, the poor dears. Here, I have something to show you that I think you might be interested in." Rarity's horn glowed and a bundle of papers came floating out of her own saddlebags. Twilight took the papers in her own field and looked at them with growing interest. "Is this the diagram for the magical construct that goes into the cachettes?" Rarity grinned. "Why, yes, it is." Twilight tilted her head, perking her ears forward curiously. "Cachettes?" "It's what we've been calling them. Magical batteries and etheric storage sound so technical, and torque doesn't apply to earrings, necklaces, and the like." "Oh, I see," Twilight said as she leaned in to get a closer look at the diagram. "Wow, they've made some refinements since I worked on it last." The initial concept for the magical batteries had been to form an incomplete spell circle, one that lacked any release conditions or triggers. The circle would gather magical energy up to its maximum capacity, but not be able to release it on its own. A pony would have to consciously draw magic from it for it to release any of the stored energy. Looks like they've made the energy gathering even more efficient than when I helped with the initial design. Twilight's eyes traced along the circle. They've simplified it considerably as well. So I understand, Rarity said. It's fairly easy to replicate, though it is a little tedious. It would be. Twilight took a sheet of paper from her own saddlebag and began taking notes. So what new materials are they trying to use for infusing this circle? Well, they have some success with various precious metals, and some dense hardwoods. Those go fairly quickly, but aren't as stable. Gems have the highest stability, but take considerably longer to inscribe. Rarity smiled. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Altering crystal structures enough to etch this design into it takes a qualified unicorn a good amount of time. I was wondering if you could think of any way to speed up the process. Twilight frowned while she studied the designs. They were really elegant in their simplicity, with hardly any room for improvement. Still, Rarity was counting on her, so she set herself to studying the designs, looking for any way to improve things at all. Her quill flew as she took notes, even going so far as to replicate the design itself on a piece of paper in minute detail in order to make sure she understood the circle in its entirety. While her quill flew, so did her mind, trying to figure out any small tweaks or changes that could result in an even simpler version of the circle. Twilight? Yes? Twilight looked up, flushing when she saw both Rarity and their waiter looking at her. Oh, sorry, I was a bit caught up in this. Did you order already, Rarity? Yes, I did. Did you know what you wanted, dear? I'll have whatever you're having, I guess, she said. The waiter made a note on his pad. Right, I'll have your food out in a jiffy. You do that, Twilight said absently as she returned to studying the design in front of her. She chewed on her bottom lip, making notes and writing out calculations on a piece of scratch paper beside her. Maybe invert the second matrix, she muttered. No, that would throw the third quadrant out of balance. We'd need to adjust the initial phase together. As she kept working on the problem, she slowly became aware of something tugging at her attention. Finally, she looked up to see Rarity looking at her with an amused smile. What? Your food is getting cold, Twilight, Rarity said, pointing with the fork held in her magical grip. Twilight looked down to see a plate with a single poached egg, rye toast, and some sectioned grapefruit sitting before her. She poked at the toast with her hoof while frowning. I really should have ordered something else. Rarity smirked. Consider it revenge for tempting me with garlic bread yesterday. Okay, fair enough. Twilight's eyes slowly gravitated back to the design schematics. I don't think I'll be able to simplify that any further, though I do have a suggestion. Rarity lowered her teacup and smiled with a twinkle in her eye. Yes, Twilight. We could increase the capacity for storage by making larger circles, Twilight said. Her horn glowed and her quill began sketching. Look, you could make a larger structure that would store a similarly larger amount of magical energy and ship those to the homes of the host families where the equestrian students will be staying. That would decrease their reliance on talks, which, in turn, would allow for fewer talks being required. Twilight, Rarity said. And I bet we could even use the larger stations. I should come up with a name for that, really. I bet we could make it so that they would actually recharge the torques. Right now we're planning on recycling the ones we ship to Earth. You know, having the students send theirs in to be recharged and sending back fully charged ones in replacement. This could cut down on a lot of the logistics required for that. Twilight, dear, Material composition wouldn't be a large problem either. It could be made out of any kind of metal or wood, or heck, even stone for a circle this large. Twilight frowned and crossed out some of the notes she'd written down before starting over with some calculations. What would be really perfect, though, is if we found some way to convert other forms of energy into magic. Say, electricity. That's not... I mean, humans have electricity in abundance. They even make it directly out of sunlight. Sunlight! That's pretty amazing, don't you think? If we could make a solar-powered AC converter... Oh, I like that name. I'll make a note of it. Then a pony could stay on Earth indefinitely. Twilight looked up and grinned. The grin started fading when she noticed the glassy-eyed look on Rarity's face. I got carried away, didn't I? Just a bit, darling, Rarity said. I was asking for the jewel, Russ, not for the sake of the exchange students. Though I must say, having a larger store of magic to charge the cachettes is a grand idea, and solves another problem we've been having. What problem would that be? Twilight asked. Well, apparently the smaller cachettes have storage issues. Well, they would have, Twilight said, nodding. The ability to retain magic increases drastically as the size of the circle increases. Something the size of an earring would last less than a day of minimal to moderate use. And that is the issue they're having, Rarity said with a sigh. However, if we can give them something larger to use to recharge it, well, that opens up many new possibilities, doesn't it? Yes! A flash of inspiration hit Twilight right then, and she grinned hugely. And I may have a way to speed up the inscribing process. Oh, that's wonderful! Rarity beamed and leaned forward eagerly. What would we need to do? Twilight's quill was already racing over a new sheet of paper as she answered. Simply put, we can use a mock-up of the design scale to the correct size and adjust for the materials used. A unicorn could use a simple transcribe spell to push it from the first medium to the second. If you use a printing press for the cycle and the target material used is standardized enough, then you could push through several inscribed cachettes in the time it takes to do a single one now. Twilight sat back, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction at the overjoyed look on Rarity's face. Oh, Twilight, you have no idea how much time this will save us. Well, I could probably come up with an estimate. How long does it take now? For a gem inscription? Rarity hummed and tapped her hoof on her chin. On a good quality gem, it takes a skilled unicorn roughly a full 8-hour day. Well then, if this works out as well as I hope it will, then I believe you'd be able to complete an inscribed gem in roughly 1/10 that time. So you would save approximately 7 hours and 12 minutes per gem, at a guess. Rarity was staring at her with a confused smile on her muzzle. Twilight decided to clarify. Of course, that's just a rough estimate based on what you've just told me and on what I believe would be the optimal results for transcribing onto a gem. I may be missing some variables since I'm not all that familiar with the current process. Oh, Twilight, Rarity said before she began laughing. After a moment, Twilight joined in, though she wasn't completely certain how what she said was funny. Applejack. Ponyville's open market was thrumming with activity even before noon. Early harvests had already started coming in from the local Earth Pony farms, mostly leafy green vegetables, and ponies were lining up to get the fresh produce. Sweet Apple Acres was geared more towards growing grains and legumes while waiting for the apples to come in, though they typically did have a field or two devoted to alfalfa. AJ wandered the open market, checking the prices, even though she didn't need any produce at the moment. Granny's garden had several types of lettuce growing in it, which was plenty for the Apple family's meals. What AJ needed had been a bit more complicated. Winter had passed, but it had left its mark on the farm. They needed fresh paint for the barn, new nails, and a variety of other durable goods. She had just arranged the delivery from Filthy Rich's barnyard bargains, and was now in the mood for a quick snack before heading back and getting to work. It was while Applejack was trotting towards Sugar Cube Corner that she spotted Erin. Her friend was walking around and scanning the sky with a thoughtful frown on her muzzle.
"Hey there, Erin,"
Applejack said as she approached.
"What's up?"
Erin blinked and looked over, breaking into a huge smile. "Hey, AJ, how are you doing today?"
"Fine, just fine. I was just heading to Sugar Cube Corner to pick myself a bite to eat. Care to join me?"
"Sure, sounds fun." Erin fell in beside Applejack. Erin was limping, Applejack noticed as they walked. Not very much, but she was definitely favoring her right foreleg.
"Everything okay there, Sugar? I only noticed you seem to be having a trouble with your leg."
Applejack pointed her muzzle at the limb in question. Erin's muzzle twisted into a grimace. "Just a little sore. My morning runs are a lot harder than they used to be. I keep hoping my Earth Pony magic will kick in, but so far it hasn't happened."
"Earth Pony magic?"
Applejack shot Aaron a confused smile.
I ain't sure I know what you mean.
You know, increased strength and endurance? Aaron glanced over at her and frowned. I thought that was part of having Earth Pony magic.
Well,
AJ chuckled.
It is, and it ain't. Earth ponies tend to be hardy, and we get knocked around more than the most ponies and still stay standing, but it ain't like we just got it hoofed over to us. We have to work to get stronger, just like any pony else.
Aaron let out a dissatisfied grunt. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get that. Granted, I've only been going for runs for a few days, but, well, my old body was a lot stronger and faster. It's annoying to be so out of shape.
You'll get there.
AJ nudged her with a shoulder.
And speaking of getting there, here we are.
Applejack held the door open, letting Aaron go in first. Mrs. Cake gasped at them, an expression of relief on her face as she came around to the front of the counter. Oh, girls, I'm so glad you're here, the shopkeeper said as she trotted towards them. Are you here to help with Pinky? AJ blinked, confused. Something's wrong with Pinky? Aaron asked, sounding concerned. Mrs. Cake's ears drooped. Oh, I just thought, well, she's been up in her room for the last 3 days and has barely left it. Her brows knit as she cast a worried glance towards the top of the staircase. I don't even know if she's been eating. We haven't seen her out of her room for days now. She scruffed a hoof on the floor. Every time we try to talk to her, she shouts through the door that she's researching. I'm starting to get really worried. AJ looked upwards in the general direction of Pinky's room. Her snack would have to wait.
We'll see what we can do, Mrs. Cake.
Oh, thank you, girls. Aaron followed Applejack up the stairs until they reached Pinky's door. Applejack was about to knock, but something just felt off.
You reckon she's okay?
AJ whispered to Aaron. The other mare's mouth was set in a firm line. I think I know what the problem is, she said, her voice sounding a little exasperated. AJ frowned and scratched a hoof along the back of her mane.
What's that?
She's probably been locked up here with her tablets this whole time. Aaron sighed. I should have expected something like this. Applejack frowned at the other mare.
Them doohickeys aren't actually dangerous, are they? Only I told Applebloom I'd let her use mine sometime.
They're not all that dangerous by themselves, Aaron replied. Applejack noticed that her ears were drooping as she said it, though. It's all in how you use them, really. With that, Aaron rapped a hoof sharply on the door 3 times. Go away! Pinky's voice said through the door. I'm busy! Pinky, it's, Sunflower. I'm here with Applejack and we— A huge commotion could be heard through the door, followed by the sounds of hoofs scrambling across the wooden floor. Half a second later, the door was flung open with a crash. The lights were off in her bedroom, and Applejack got a quick impression of bloodshot eyes and a snarled mane. There was a shriek of "Sunflower!" as 2 pink hoofs shot out of the doorway, wrapping Aaron's neck and pulling her into the darkness.
Oh,
Applejack proceeded more carefully, looking around as she stepped into Pinky's bedroom. All of the shades were lowered, casting the room in gloomy shadows. Empty bags of snack chips littered the floor, and every surface had a bakery box stacked on it, some empty and others still partially full. It looked like Pinky's diet for the last 3 days had been nothing to brag about. Pinky herself was looking even rougher. Her coat was greasy and sticking up in all directions, which AJ judged meant that she hadn't showered or even brushed herself in the last few days. The food crumbs stuck in Pinky's coat and mane were a pretty big hint that she was right.
Definitely gotta keep an eye on Applebloom if I ever let her use mine,
Applejack thought. Pinky had Aaron in the middle of the floor, holding Aaron's muzzle between her pink hoofs while she shot off question after question, barely seeming to take time to breathe as she did so. Aaron was frozen, staring at Pinky like a mouse would stare at a snake. "Do I have to go there? Does it really matter who was on first? Why just the thermos? Do your toys really come to life when no one is looking? Do you guys really have magic board games, and how can I get one? How many humans actually try to raise leopards?" Applejack put a hoof on Pinky's shoulder.
"Pinky,"
she said, trying to get a word in edgewise. "Was completely obsessed with honey, only he spelled it wrong. There are ogres in the swamps? Was Gary really king of all humans? And video games. I know I missed so many references, I need you to explain them to me."
"Pinky,"
Applejack said, giving her friend a little shake. "Someone should tell that crickets that wishing on stars doesn't anything. I've tried it." Enough, Applejack decided was enough. She pulled Pinkie Pie away from Aaron and turned her around so that they were facing each other.
"Pinkie Pie, snap out of it!"
P. Sherman! Pinky rasped weakly, her eyes darting and haunted. 42, Wallaby Way!
Pinky, stop!
Where did they get the coconuts, Applejack? Pinky's eyes focused on her, intent and frantic. Where? They're tropical! The prop department, Erin said, finally shaking off her shock. It was just a movie, Pinkie Pie. Pinky's head slowly rotated to look at Erin. Her eyes blinked slowly and a look of realization started to settle over her features. Oh, that's right, Pinky said in a whisper. The tension fled and her body slumped. I kind of forgot. I haven't slept in a while, I think. Have you been watching movies on your tablet this whole time? Erin asked, frowning at a glowing lump on Pinky's bed. Mr. Hagglebunny, Pinky corrected absently, her head drooping towards the floor. And, kinda, I guess. Pinky, that was 3 days ago. Oh. Pinky blinked owlishly and looked around as if seeing her room for the first time. Really? She asked in a meek little voice.
Really?
Applejack said.
At least that's when I got mine, and you've been holed up here this whole time doing nothing but watching movies.
And shows and short subjects. Pinky shuddered and whispered. There's so many. Applejack snorted and walked over and flicked on the light switch, which caused Pinky to flinch and suck in a breath of air while clenching her eyes shut. The light didn't do the room's appearance any favors, and now that the initial shock was over, she became aware of the smell, a combination of sugar, stale air, and unwashed pony.
First things first,
Applejack said, trotting over to a window and opening the shade.
We got these windows open and got some fresh air in here.
She suited words to action, pushing the window up. A welcome breeze immediately started to freshen the room as she made her way to a second window.
In the meanwhile, Pinky, you're going to take a shower,
AJ said as she struggled with the second window. It was stubborn, requiring a bit more muscle than the first one.
You'll feel better if you're clean, I reckon.
Oh! Pinky looked down at herself, blushing. Yeah, I suppose I'm probably pretty stinky, huh?
Just a bit, Applejack said with a smile. While you're cleaning yourself up, Erin and I will clean up your room.
We will? Erin asked, flinching a little when AJ turned to stare at her. I mean, yeah, we will. Oh, you don't have to.
Just hold it there, Sugar Cube,
Applejack said.
You need a clean place to sleep, and you're gonna sleep just as soon as you get back out of your shower.
She butted Pinky gently with her head, urging her towards the door.
Go on now, we got this.
Pinky sighed and, defeated, slunk towards the bathroom. Applejack took a moment to look around the room.
Right,
she said with a decisive nod.
Erin, can you go and ask Mrs. Cake where the clean bedsheets are? This needs changing.
On it, Erin said, heading towards the doorway.
And bring up a garbage bag when you come back up.
Applejack looked around and sighed.
Max are tall.
Right, Erin called back as her hoofs clattered down the stairs. AJ worked on getting the rest of the windows open. Between the fresh air and the natural light, things were already a lot better in Pinky's room. The next order of business, Applejack decided, was to strip the bed. She started to make her way over only to stop and stare at what she saw there. Pinky's bed wasn't unoccupied. Propped up in a sitting position was a large stuffed rabbit roughly the size of a small dog. It was a dark, cloudy gray with a dingy white belly. It had shiny black button eyes, and one of its large ears was flopped over its face. That, along with a mouth that seemed to be stitched into a frown, gave the thing a morose appearance. The rabbit was wearing denim overalls, but that wasn't the strangest thing. The front of the overalls had been cut away and inexpertly sewn back together into a kind of harness. Something glassy had been held within the harness, and after a moment, Applejack realized it was Pinky's tablet. The power cord trailed out of the pocket of the rabbit's overalls and down towards the outlet.
So,
Applejack said with a grin as she approached it.
You must be Mr. Hagglebunny.
She wasn't expecting the screen to light up, and she sure wasn't expecting a sad sound voice to emanate from the stuffed rabbit.
That's right,
Mr. Hagglebunny said.
Huh?
Applejack said, taking a step back.
That's creepy.
What's creepy? Erin asked from the doorway. She had a bundle of clean sheets on her back. Applejack pointed wordlessly. Erin trotted up to get a better look, then stopped and stared for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she burst out laughing. Oh, that's perfect, Erin said. That is so Pinkie Pie. Applejack couldn't help a chuckle of her own.
Reckon you're right. Come on, let's get this room cleaned up.
Between the two of them, it didn't take too long. Mr. Hugglebunny got moved to the nightstand, the sheets were changed and the blankets vigorously shaken to expel any wayward crumbs. The stale old baked goods and snack bags were piled into the garbage bags. Gummy, Pinkie's pet alligator, was standing by his food dish, which had separate bowls for food and water, both of which were full. That meant that Pinkie had at least still taken care of her pet, even though she'd stopped taking care of herself. They had just finished cleaning the floor when a freshly showered and much saner-looking Pinkie Pie walked back into the room.
"Oh, wowie!"
Pinkie said, looking around with wide eyes.
"You didn't have to do all that. Now I feel bad."
"I'm the one who should feel bad," Erin said with a sigh. "I didn't mean for my present to make you stay up for 3 days straight."
"Well, that's my fault,"
Pinkie said, then yawned until her jaw cracked.
"Nice work on Mr. Hugglebunny,"
Erin said, nodding towards the stuffed rabbit which was currently slumped over itself on the nightstand.
"Thanks."
"No, Pinkie,"
Applejack said, putting on the voice she used to talk to Applebloom when the girl was up to her usual shenanigans.
"I don't want to hear about you doing this again. You understand? You need to sleep, and you can't shut yourself away for days just to play with a new toy, no matter how fun it is."
Pinkie sighed, her head drooping towards the floor.
"Yes, Mom."
Applejack spluttered.
"I ain't."
She stopped, noting that Pinkie was looking up at her with a gleam in her eye and a small smile curling up the corner of her mouth. She chuckled.
"Right, sorry, I'm just worried about you, that's all."
"Thanks, AJ,"
Pinkie said, coming up and giving her a hug. She smelled a lot better, like soap and shampoo, AJ noted. Then Pinkie hugged Erin too.
"Thank you both. If it's okay with you, I think I'll get some sleep now."
She yawned again.
"I'm pretty tired."
"You got it,"
Applejack said as she and Erin moved out to the hallway. As AJ shut off the lights, she noticed that Pinkie had already slid between the sheets.
"Good night, Mr. Hugglebunny,"
Pinkie murmured as Applejack shut the door.
"Good night, Pinkie Pie,"
the stuffed rabbit replied. Applejack shuddered.
"That's just plain weird,"
she whispered to Erin, who was already making her way downstairs. Erin chuckled.
"You get used to it if you set up the personal assistant feature."
"I ain't so sure I want to now,"
Applejack replied as she followed Erin down to the main floor. Mrs. Cake was overjoyed to hear that Pinkie had showered and was now sleeping off her 3-day movie binge. In fact, she was so happy that she refused to take their bits when they ordered, no matter how much Applejack argued. AJ finally gave in with a sigh and settled down to eat her pastry. Applejack's apple tart didn't last very long, and neither did Erin's chocolate-drizzled donut. Soon enough, the two of them were back out on the road.
"Well, that was sure strange,"
Applejack said as they walked along. Erin, who looked a little downcast, nodded.
"Yeah, I really should have checked up on her sooner."
"Ain't your fault,"
Applejack asserted.
"Pinkie's a grown mare. She should have known to take care of herself."
Erin grunted and walked in silence for a few seconds. Eventually, her eyes turned skyward again.
"Looking for something?"
Erin smiled sheepishly.
Yeah, Rainbow Dash took me flying yesterday. I was kind of hoping she'd be able to do it again today."
Applejack whistled, impressed.
"You're up and flying already. That's sure impressive."
"I'm not exactly flying,"
Erin said with a wince.
"More like being dragged through the air. My wings still aren't working right."
Erin scowled at the offending appendages. Applejack shot her a sympathetic smile.
"I'm sure it'll all work out, Erin."
"Yeah,"
Erin said morosely.
"I'm probably just too eager. Heck, I haven't even been here a week yet."
They walked in silence for a little while. Then Applejack had an idea.
"Tell you what, why don't you come out to the farm for a bit and we'll see if we can't help you figure out how to get in touch with your pony magic?"
Erin perked up at that.
"Really?"
"Why not?"
Applejack chuckled.
"Gotta warn you, though, it ain't like learning unicorn magic. To get in touch with your pony magic, I gotta work you, and hard. It's the only way."
"That's fine,"
Erin said with an eager smile.
"Well, come on, then,"
Applejack said, grinning. She broke into an eager trot, heading for home. Erin. The rhythmic click-clacking of the train provided an underlying rhythm to Aaron and Ditsy's conversation on what had turned out to be an absolutely beautiful Saturday morning. The two of them were sitting across from each other on the Canterlot Express, talking quietly while Dinky ignored them both in order to stand up on her hind legs and peer out the window at the scenery that was drifting by. Aaron's wings twitched uncomfortably under her simple green sundress. It was one that Rarity had made for her before she'd gone back to Earth and, as such, it was lacking in wing holes. Fortunately, her first pony body had been just a bit broader across the shoulders, which meant that there was enough room for the wings underneath. Still, the fabric was pressing her wings to her sides, causing the feathers to ruffle occasionally. To Aaron, the mild discomfort was worth it. She wasn't getting nearly as many stares as an apparent unicorn than she had as an alicorn. Ditsy had seen Aaron in her dress that morning and had immediately panicked, asking if it was expected to wear clothes in Canterlot. Aaron had assured her that plenty of ponies went without. Ditsy had compromised with a white-brimmed white straw hat with a bright yellow daisy tucked into its pink band, which had the advantage of looking nice while also keeping the sun out of her eyes. Dinky had given in to her mother's demands to look presentable, but only to the extent that she'd allowed her mane and tail to be combed and tied back with dark purple ribbons. Currently, Aaron was relating her experiences with trying to unlock Earth Pony magic, trying to embellish the story here and there to make it more interesting. Still, there was only so much one could do when working with stories about weeding and hauling bags of seed until every part of your body ached.
"At least they fed me," Aaron said with a chuckle. "Applejack insisted, told me all my work was worth at least a meal." "And you said yes, right?"
Ditsy asked.
"Of course. Have you ever had Granny Smith's cooking?" "Can't say that I have."
Ditsy cleared her throat and glanced at her filly, who was still totally enraptured by the whole view outside of the window.
"I imagine Big Macintosh was there."
"Yeah," Aaron replied. She tilted her head, looking curiously at Ditsy. There had been an odd note in the mare's voice when she asked that.
"He was there. Why?"
Ditsy cleared her throat and looked away.
He's nice, and he's a good worker."
She blushed and leaned closer, adding in a near whisper,
"And he's not bad to look at either."
Aaron gasped, clapping both forehoofs to her mouth.
"Oh my gosh, are you—"
"Shh," Ditsy said, nodding towards her daughter, who was still glued to the window.
"Let's just say, sometimes the view is so nice that I sometimes find myself staying longer than strictly necessary when I deliver their mail."
Aaron couldn't help but giggling, and Ditsy joined in a moment later. This caught Dinky's attention, who turned and scowled at them.
"What's so funny?"
the filly asked.
"Nothing,"
Aaron and Ditsy said at the same moment, which got them giggling harder. Dinky grunted in annoyance and went back to staring out the window. Aaron resolved to try to find some subtle way of sounding out Macintosh to see if he'd be interested in dating a mare with a young filly. "So, do you think it did any good?" Ditsy asked after the giggles died down. "Do you feel any closer to being able to use Earth Pony magic?" Aaron grimaced.
"I don't know about that, but the Earth felt a lot closer to me by the time I was done."
"Oh?"
"Yeah, it was caked onto my hoofs, crusted into my coat, and I even had some in my mane and tail."
Aaron sighed.
"You should have seen the state of my shower once I got done washing it all out."
Ditsy gave a sympathetic wince.
"I can imagine. I know what it's like when Dinky comes in after rolling around in the mud for a day."
Dinky pulled her attention away from the window.
"I don't roll in the mud." "What about last Tuesday?" "That was a mud fight." "Well, that mud fight took me almost 2 hours of cleaning after you tacked half of Ponyville through my house, little filly,"
Ditsy said with a frown.
"Yeah, well—"
Dinky blushed before letting out an annoyed huff.
"Rumble started it."
Ditsy shook her head. Dinky, in an apparent bid to pretend like the last few seconds of conversation never happened, turned resolutely back to the window and pointedly ignored them.
"So, what were you two planning on doing while I'm looking up Twilight?"
Aaron asked.
"Did you want to see if I could give you a quick tour of the palace?"
Dinky whipped her head around to stare at her mother with pleading eyes, which Ditsy ignored.
"That's okay,"
Ditsy said, ignoring the whine her daughter let out in response.
"I'd feel pretty out of place around all those important ponies. I was thinking of taking Dinky to see the Royal History Museum. We could meet up there once you're done talking to your people if you want."
Aaron wanted to make some assurance that Ditsy would fit right in with the important ponies, but decided not to push it if the mare felt uncomfortable about it. Besides, The museum was actually a place she was interested in as well.
"Sounds good," she said.
They chatted for a while longer, mostly just exchanging small talk about life in Ponyville. The train pulled up to Canterlot Station slightly after noon. As they put their saddlebags on, Aaron and Ditsy confirmed their plans to meet at the museum's gift shop in 3 hours, said their goodbyes and went on their separate ways. As opposed to her last visit to Canterlot, this time every pony ignored her. Aaron grinned as she trotted along, glad that she'd thought of wearing a dress this time, even if it did make it feel like a bunch of sweat was gathering under her wings. The guards at the castle gateway took a quick look at the ID that Aaron produced from her saddlebags before ushering her in. Aaron asked the palace servant where to find Twilight's quarters. The first servant didn't know, but she was able to bring Aaron to a second servant who gave her what were probably the most convoluted directions that Aaron had ever heard. With an eye on the time, Aaron trotted through the hallways, occasionally asking for directions until she found herself outside of what she was pretty sure was the apartment that Twilight was currently staying in. She knocked and waited. After a few seconds, the door opened, revealing a startled Twilight Sparkle.
"Oh, Aaron, I wasn't expecting you,"
Twilight said. There was a long pause while Aaron worked it over in her head.
You asked me to stop by, remember?"
Aaron studied the blank look on Twilight's face.
"The exchange students and how having a native Earthling might help?"
Twilight's mouth dropped open and her eyes widened as the fur on her cheeks darkened with a blush.
"Oh, that all happened last night, actually."
Aaron gaped at her.
Sorry?"
Twilight said with a feeble smile.
"I totally forgot I asked you to come out. The paperwork was a mess and everything was so last minute, it was insane. I was running my tail off the minute I walked through the door. The only one I could count on was Spike from my parents' place for some extra help, and it still was a close thing."
She scuffled her hoofs and ducked her head.
"You're not mad, are you?"
Aaron blinked several times in rapid succession. Then her shoulders started shaking. A moment later, the first chuckles bubbled up, quickly turning into full-blown laughter.
"Oh, Twilight," she said. "Don't ever change. No, I'm not mad. This actually works out well for me."
"It does?"
"Yeah, my neighbor Ditsy wanted to see Canterlot anyway. She has some relatives in Cloudsdale, so if you didn't need me, we were going to head out and stay with them while she showed me around the city."
Aaron grinned.
"You know how much I've always wanted to go to Cloudsdale, right?"
Twilight let out a relieved sigh.
"Right,"
she said with a nod.
"I'm still sorry. I shouldn't have forgotten." "It's fine, really. So, what are your plans for today?"
Aaron asked.
"I'm meeting up with Ditsy and her daughter for a late lunch after taking care of some things in the Harmonics compound. We're meeting at the Royal History Museum. Did you want to join us?" "Oh, museum,"
Twilight said, her eyes going wide.
"Oh, but I can't. Princess Luna was going to give me my first lessons in dream magic in about 10 minutes. "Well, that sounds even better."
Aaron smiled and nudged her friend with a hoof.
"You'll be the first unicorn to learn this magic in centuries, right?"
"The first of many," Twilight replied, nodding and doing a very poor job of hiding the gleeful smile on her face.
"And not just unicorns. It seems like Pegasi and Earth ponies can learn aspects of this magic too." "Oh, neat."
Twilight nodded again.
"Luna sent out couriers all over Equestria with recruitment posters, and apparently the first volunteers have already started to arrive." "Well, that's great. I should get going to Luna's chambers," Twilight said. "Did you want to walk with me?" "Sure,"
Aaron said, stepping aside so Twilight could exit her apartment. The two friends filled each other in on their days since they'd last seen each other. They were only able to cover the very basics before they reached the doors to Luna's own quarters. The two royal guards standing outside of her door gave them both implacable looks before returning their stares to the opposite walls.
"I guess I'll see you when I get back to Ponyville," Twilight said, giving Aaron a hug. "Give the girls my love for me, okay?" "You got it," Aaron replied, returning the hug. "You take care and have fun." "How can I not?" Twilight asked with a smile that lit up her face. "I'm going to be learning new magic."
Aaron laughed. Twilight disengaged the hug and turned to the guards, who knocked and opened the doors to Luna's chambers without a word. With one last wave, Twilight turned and trotted eagerly through the doorway. Watching her friend go, Aaron couldn't help but feel a little sad. It would be at least a few more days before they got to see each other again. Still, maybe this dream magic was something that Twilight could end up teaching her along with regular magic. Perked up by that thought, Erin gave both of the guards a polite nod, which was, of course, stoically ignored, and then walked away, making her way towards the royal gardens and the harmonics gateway back to Earth. Maggie. Dr. Maggie Hansen frowned at her tablet, flipping through page after page of expenses and budget items. She could feel a headache coming on, and not for the first time. She marveled at how different math could feel when it was used in physics versus, say, a cost analysis report. A brief knock at her door broke her concentration. "Come on in," she called out, immensely grateful for the excuse to put the tablet aside. The door was opened by a familiar auburn-maned pony. "Hi, Maggie," Erin said with a smile. "Erin, good to see you. Come on in." "Thanks," Erin said. She opened the door wide enough to accommodate the saddlebags she was wearing over the light green dress and stepped inside. "Do you have a minute? I have all the time in the world for anything that doesn't involve budgets, shipments, and line items," Maggie said with a chuckle. Erin froze in the process of sitting down in one of the pony-adapted chairs in Maggie's office. "Ah," she said, then cleared her throat. "Well, about shipments." Maggie sighed. "What about shipments?" "Well, I may have just ordered a ton of stuff online and used the address here as a shipping address." Maggie chuckled. "That's fine. I told you that you could do that, remember?" Erin nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Yeah, though this might be a bit more than you intended for me when you made that offer." "What do you mean?" Maggie asked with a sinking feeling in her gut. "Well, it might be easier if I just showed you." Erin pulled her own tablet out of her saddlebags with her teeth. After tapping a few times with the mouth-held stylus, she passed the tablet over to Maggie, who began flipping through various order confirmations. Wow. Maggie let out a low whistle. "This is kind of a lot of stuff." Yeah." Erin fidgeted in her chair for a moment. "Is that okay?" "Yeah, it's fine. Can you send the order confirmations to my email? I'll put the mailroom on alert." One particular item caught Maggie's attention. "A bulk order of Lego bricks?" Erin blushed and cleared her throat. "My neighbor has the cutest little filly," she said with a way of explanation. Maggie laughed, shaking her head as she passed the tablet back. "Might be kind of tricky, taking them back apart by mouth," she pointed out. Then she laughed again at the dismayed look on Erin's face. "I didn't think of that." Erin frowned and ran a hoof through her mane. "Well, I suppose I'll still order them. Maybe she can figure out how to take them apart with her magic." "Oh, she's a unicorn?" "Yep." Erin grinned and perked back up. "Her name is Dinky. I'm actually meeting her and her mother at the Royal Museum in a little bit. And then we're all going to Cloudsdale." "Oh, nice," Maggie said, straightening up in her chair. "Make sure to take lots of pictures." "Are you kidding? I'm probably going to fill up the storage on my tablet with them." "Send them to me next week when the gateway opens back up if you can," Maggie said. "Oh, that reminds me. We're finally getting the contractors out there next weekend. They'll get the Wi-Fi working, get the solar tiles installed, and then leave the weekend after." "Oh, cool," Erin said, her ears perking up. "I know the mayor was concerned about it. You'll probably find my letter waiting for you when you get back to your house, asking you to get a place for them at the local inn." "Oh, sure, I can do that. Pony beds might be a little on the short side, so how many will be coming?" 4 for the solar panels and 6 for the Wi-Fi setup, and they'll be bringing air mattresses, so no worries there," Maggie said. "You think you have enough bits on hand for that?" Erin chewed her lower lip for a few seconds before nodding. "Yeah, I should." "Well, here," Maggie said, rummaging around in a desk drawer until she found a clothes bag. She passed it over to Erin, who took it in an upturned hoof. "There's 8 bars and 100 bits in there. That should cover lodging and food. Try to get receipts for everything if you can, so we can track it all." "Got it," Erin said as she tucked the bit pouch into her saddlebags. "I should probably get going. I'm not sure how long it will take me to get to the museum, and I don't want to be late." She snorted and stamped a hoof. "I probably shouldn't have called my mom and just stuck to sending her an email like I'd originally intended. I really didn't think we would talk that long." Maggie thought about how she would have felt just getting an email from one of her daughters after that daughter had moved to an entirely different world for a week. Well, knowing Lynn, I'm sure she preferred the call over the email. Moms never stop worrying about their kids after all. Erin's ears flattened as she ducked her head sheepishly.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. Well, I suppose I should get back to this budget, Maggie said, casting a loathing glance at her own tablet and the hateful budgetary analysis contained within. Don't forget to send those email confirmations to me. Got it, Erin said as she slid out of her chair. I'll get them to you before I got back across the gateway. Thanks, kiddo, Maggie said. They said their goodbyes. Maggie stared at the door of her office for a few seconds after Erin left, then sighed and picked up her tablet to begin once again trying to make heads or tails out of their third-quarter budgetary requirements. It was a small town in the middle of nowhere, so far north that there was some dispute if it was even inside the borders of Equestria. As far as the locals were concerned, it could go either way. When things were going well, then the town was independent and Equestria could mind its own business. When things were going poorly, which was more often than not these days, then the Equestrian government wasn't doing their jobs right. Some ponies would tell you that the name of the town was Trotter's Mill. Others would tell you that it was called Northreach. The one tavern in the town saw the occasional brawl because of this. In fact, brawls happened often enough that the proprietor of the tavern never bothered replacing the glass in the windows that got broken, instead installing sliding wooden shutters which were left open during business hour on the rare days when the weather was nice enough. The roads were deeply rutted with wagon tracks, left there after the rains that had turned the streets to mud, which happened every spring. A brown-cloaked mare stepped carefully between the ruts, not wanting to twist an ankle. She had a long way to go still, and an injury at this stage of her journey was unacceptable. She didn't know much about this town. In fact, she didn't know anything about it other than the name that was on the map she'd purchased 3 towns back. The map had listed the town's name as Hay Junction, and it was a fortunate thing that she never mentioned that name to any pony who lived there. The resulting fight would likely have lasted for days. After all, there wasn't much else to do beside fight in this town once the day was done. Her plan, such as it was to find an inn to spend the night. She had a small bag of bits around her neck and a larger bag secured firmly under her belly. This was a rough countryside after all. Robbery was a definite possibility. With any luck, any thieves would be satisfied with a smaller bag of bits around her neck and not be bothered to search her. She'd worked hard for those bits. She wasn't about to let some dirty ruffian take them away. Her plan was interrupted by the crowd. There were about 12 of them gathered outside of a large notice board, grumbling and gripping to each other as they eyed a young Pegasus attaching a notice to the board. She slowed to a halt, eyeing the ponies and occasional griffin warily from under her cowl. In her experience, a muttering crowd was rarely a good thing. Fortunately for her, the crowd's ire was focused on the young Pegasus stallion who was dressed in a sash of midnight blue and silver. The mare recognized Princess Luna's colors when she saw them. Curiosity welled up, and against her better judgment, she approached the scene. The Pegasus was ignoring the crowd, though the way he was twitching his ears and ruffling his feathers indicated that he wasn't unaware of the mood. The large notice was being attached in the center of the board, the Pegasus beating in the nails with his steel-shod hoof instead of using a hammer. When he was done, he cast a wary eye over his shoulder, spread his wings, and launched himself into the air. The mare faded back into the convenient alleyway as the town's ponies crowded around the sign. There was arguing, a little bit of shouting, and a scuffle or two. Eventually, every pony moved on, either to their homes or to the tavern, where they could complain loudly about the notice. The mare stepped out of her hiding place, glancing around to make sure no pony was looking her way. It was clear. With a light step, she trotted up to the notice. It was on creamy white paper with red scrollwork border and lovely calligraphy. It was a pity that some pony had spat on it. She read the notice once, quickly. Then, surprised, she read it again more slowly. Princess Luna needs you. Do you have what it takes to join the Dream Guard? Generous pay with great benefits. An ancient school of magic revived for the modern era and taught by Princess Luna herself. Open to Earth ponies, Pegasi, and unicorns of all backgrounds. Apply in person at Canterlot Palace. Or apply by mail at the address below. Only the best will be accepted. Do you have what it takes? Find out today. The bottom of the notice had the promised address as well as Princess Luna's royal seal. The mare hummed uncertainly, considering her options. On the one hoof, she had a plan already. Granted, it was a plan that had dragged her halfway across Equestria through tiny little ramshackle towns and would soon continue into lands unknown, by which she meant unknown by any pony civilized, of course. On the other hoof, it was entirely possible that she was chasing a fantasy and would find nothing at the end of her quest aside from bitter disappointment. That was assuming she managed to avoid the robbers, the wolves, the bears, and freezing to death in the bitter cold of a land that hadn't quite realized that it was supposed to be spring. This dream got so... a new school of magic, new opportunities, and a chance to be taught by a princess. The mare stood, frozen with indecision, in front of the notice board for a good 10 minutes. Finally, with a sigh, she let her head droop. Chasing power for power's sake was one thing, and she was even alright with the potential disappointment that would set in if it turned out that she was only chasing shadows. But she was so very tired already. The thought of continuing on through such an unpleasant course when a much more appealing opportunity presented itself was simply too much to bear. Besides, she could get a room in Canterlot that had actual hot running water for a bath. A light blue hoof reached up and pushed the cowl of her cloak back, revealing a silvery blue mane perched over a weary but determined face. "I shall join this dream guard," the mare said, her voice resolute in spite of the exhaustion she felt. "Just you wait, Twilight Sparkle, I will master this new magic, and then you will have to acknowledge that the great and powerful Trixie is a mare to contend with."
"Hey, shut up out there!"
Trixie jumped, letting out a startled squawk. She looked around and noticed, with great discomfort, that very nearly every window she could see had the face of a scowling pony or griffin staring out of it. Each and every one of them was focused on her. "Trixie believes she should be going," she muttered, turning away from the notice board and starting to trot away. She heard a door slam behind her. "With haste!" She magicked a smoke bomb out of her saddlebags and dropped it behind her as she broke into a run. And as she galloped away from the town, she started laughing. Maybe this was a sign that her life was finally starting to turn around. "This could be the start of great things indeed," she decided. With another laugh, Trixie increased her speed, heading south. Back towards Equestria where, with any luck, her destiny awaited her.